the CIO Perspective, Evaluating AI Solutions for Neuro and Vascular Service Lines, sponsored by Viz AI. Our speaker today is Andy Draper, PhD, founder of greencio.org and CIO of the HCA Continental Division. With that, I'll hand over to Andy to begin the presentation.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Marianne. I am an operator, and so in a large health system, which I'll explain here. So my goal in this presentation today is to take you through a quick summary of AI, just as kind of a foundation, and then we'll talk about the case study of Viz AI. I wanted to tell you I'm not paid by Viz. I am a fan of Viz since the very beginning of our relationship about 5 years ago. I'm second generation hospital administrator. I've been an entrepreneur 3 times. I've been a CIO for 10 years now. I've been in healthcare IT starting at Cerner 20 years ago. I just love this space. I love the CIO role. I love that the CIO has a view of the organization that few people do, perhaps the CEO and the CFO. But as CIOs, there's 2 things I love about it. One is we have to do a differential diagnosis to figure out what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And that is a tactical issue, like is something not working, but it's also a strategic thing. And so when we talk about growth and the strategy and quality, we have to get in the weeds of the technology and the workflow. You know, all of us have made a career out of saying people, process, and technology. And that's what I like about what Viz has done and our role as CIO. So I also, just a quick, HIMSS has been a fantastic supporter of greencio.org. It's an opportunity for CIOs to start asking our companies, what is our plan to get to carbon zero? So feel free to take a look at that. One of the reasons that I believe in artificial intelligence, as I know you all do, is that healthcare desperately needs productivity increases. Productivity has occurred in other industries, and in our personal lives, we're much more efficient today with cell phones and messaging and all the app capabilities than we were 10 years ago prior to its invention. And healthcare is, because of the way it is, and I won't go into that, is always looking for productivity improvements. And technology is a big win for that, and so is artificial intelligence. And this slide is just a quick summary of what I found in preparing this research for this presentation. 40% of our nurses spend their time finding stuff or double checking stuff. If you add documentation in there, 60% of our nurses' time, our most valuable resource now more than ever in the pandemic, is spent doing really menial tasks that we wouldn't have put up with 10 years ago. And so we need to smarten up as an industry, and that means, to me, taking advantage of every productivity gain that we can, and that often means machine learning and artificial intelligence. So a brief history, and I teach at the University of Denver in their Masters of Health Informatics program. I'm sure many of you are also engaged in your local communities. There's a great movie called The Imitation Game. It's about Alan Turing. He was brilliant. The picture on the bottom right is the first Turing machine, and you can see all the different connectors that it had. And it's arguably the first computer. And this computer was built to help defeat Nazism in World War II. And it looked at the codes that the Nazis were sending over and then started to diagnose what those codes were so that they could then save the civilians across Europe. Years later, John McCarthy, who's pictured here in a setting which is a computer system not too much different than Alan Turing's on the right, it just has a few more tapes. And some of us who've been around long enough will recognize those kind of data processing rooms. And so, not coincidentally, AI started to take off as computing power has taken off. And that compute power is what drives all of the technology using artificial intelligence, natural language processing, machine learning, imaging processing. And so what's interesting to me in looking at the history is AI is always trying to mimic the human brain. And there was an article last week that Google's DeepMind took another iteration forward, but it still does not equal the power of the human brain. But when we talk about AI, we're talking about concepts that are very similar to us as humans, and that is one of experience. So when we select a surgeon or a physician for care, or a restaurant for good food, or wine for a good bottle, we want experience in that event. In healthcare, we want surgeons that are experienced. We ask our neighbors and friends, who is a good orthopedic surgeon? When we ask about head issues, neurology, we say, what hospital do you go to for neuro? Why? Because we as humans, as we select healthcare, we want to go to places that have experience. And experience means that you have volume. And experience means that you're able to see the variances in context, so that the 1% case, which is a really problematic case, is more routine. And that's why we look at that. That's what AI does. It takes massive amounts of data, uses the algorithms and the experience based in those algorithms and machine learning, whatever you want to call them, and makes it into experience. And that's something that AI is mimicking, is our brain, our experience. Scale is another concept. In computing, we know scale is big with the end user devices we manage, the compute power that's in our private clouds, our public clouds, and scale is another concept. And then lastly, applications. Applications can be in the cloud. It could be the processing, particularly like the one that Viz has that looks at all the images, which we'll talk about. It also can be in a simple application. And so how does computing take the experience and the scale and boil it down into an application which is really defined by the iPhone experience over the past 10 years? Another thing about artificial intelligence is it uses structured and unstructured data. And if you look at a Google or Facebook or something like that, they've created their code. So the algorithms that they use to define their data set that they use to define their algorithms are based on code that they created. But in healthcare, even with electronic medical records, most of the data is unstructured. 80% of the data is unstructured. It's basically words. It's pictures. It's understanding what is involved with the different data sets. And so with the case of Viz, which we'll talk about, that is a image. You could argue it may be a structured image. I think you could also argue that it's largely unstructured and that it's not discrete data, ones or zeros. It's a picture that has to be interpreted. And so healthcare data is by nature very messy, and that's been one of the limiters in the productivity gains. I'm sure many of you who are listening to my conversation right now would disagree with some of these things or would improve upon them, and I'm glad you are thinking that way. This is the basics of artificial intelligence, and then we'll talk about how it applies to neuro and vascular. I'd also say, and this is a whole industry, and in my course on AI that I teach, AI strategy, the ethical questions about artificial intelligence and bioethics is becoming a field in itself. And I think some of the things that you look at are, should patient consent be obtained? And that's kind of a baseline. Some bioethicists, and I was talking to one the other day, said, oh, that's too simple. Well, that's fine. I think one of the concepts about consent is if you're asking for consent, does the clinician know enough to really accurately describe it? And then when does consent kind of fade away? Does a clinician have to ask for consent if they're using a new scalpel that they didn't use yesterday? Some of this becomes state of the market. And so, that's an ethical question. is it sufficiently different than the standard of practice? I think Viz AI and AI tools are becoming standard of practice. And if you go into the medical schools, they are wanting those tools, and they're going to come out graduating into our hospitals as residents, and they're going to be expecting these tools. So this happens very quickly. Another question is the physician's judgment being replaced by the computer, or is it enhanced? And one of the ways that I look at AI is on the continuum of if-then statements. So I remember working at Cerner years ago, going to physicians in Detroit and saying, you can tell me what your patient's allergies are, and we can create an alert that. And they said, penicillin, and that was a great example back 20 years ago. And that's a very simple if-then statement. It's very much like the code that a lot of us write when we're in high school, if-then. This is very similar to that, but it's on a much more advanced and high computing power continuum. And so that's where I see AI as being fitted. It's not in the very beginning, it's kind of in the more advanced, but it's a decision support tool for physicians. Also, the FDA is involved. For so many of these tools, you have to have FDA approval, which is a barrier to entry for the companies, but it's also a quality judgment that the U.S. healthcare system is giving. And then one of the big things that we've all read about recently are the algorithms and the data sets being used in an ethically way and developed in an ethically way. So we've developed some homegrown algorithms based on our data set, and we talked about expanding it to other HCA markets. One of the things is they said, well, we'll have to use a different data set or adjust that statistically to accommodate the different demographics in different parts of the United States. And so, as we've seen, are the developers using ethical standards? Are they looking at all data sets as they ask these questions? And with the bigger the data set, of course, the less the variance that we can have in the algorithms, which makes it a more pure algorithm. I think also we can't forget that humans are biased. And so algorithms and AI may actually perfect imperfect humans. There may be a physician who may be biased in their perception of something, and an algorithm would help offset that or mitigate that. So I'm not a bioethicist, I'm not an expert, but there are AI questions, and I think for this presentation, Viz has addressed those things, and we can talk about that. Okay, so now the real world. How can we use AI to help neuro and vascular service lines? So 5 years ago, Viz came to me as a CIO and said, we know that one of your hospitals is the top 100 stroke center. We've talked to those surgeons and the interventionalists there, and we think this is an important tool for you to consider. And we were all ears. One of the reasons is neuro and vascular service lines are high margin. They're also very high complex, and they have a very complex care team that's involved, from the ambulance, which we'll talk about, to the surgeon, to the interventionalist, to the imaging center, and then post-operative or post-interventional care or the referral. And so we said, yes, this is an opportunity for productivity. If you think about in the current state, without a technology like this, you have a patient that presents into the ED. The ED does a CAT scan. They have to call the radiologist. They say the radiologist, this is a stat head CT. The radiologist takes a look at it, then says, yes, this is a potential stroke. You got to get them in the cath lab. All these different pieces, and I won't diagnose each step of this, but it is massive. Our stroke care teams often involve 18 different people. And so Viz is a technology which we'll talk about that our physicians and our stroke coordinators said, hey, this can simplify this. This picture is worth 1,000 words. But if I can share that picture to 18 people, it's worth 18,000 words within a second. And that's pretty powerful. So the stroke service line, the neuro service line, clearly a high acuity, high margin service line, very important from a timing perspective, as many of you know. Getting the intervention done as quickly as possible saves lives, saves brain cells. And the diagnosis of AAAs are a huge problem as well. And what size is the AAA, and how do you treat that? And is that critical, or something that could be deferred? So we said, absolutely, we need this artificial intelligence, machine learning technology. We need the imaging process because there's an opportunity to reduce minutes in this whole process. When they came to me, and this was about 5 years ago, and I'm pleased to say our HCA market called Health One in Denver was one of the first 5 Viz clients in the world. I said, and I'm very interested in artificial intelligence. I said, I need a single platform. As an IT guy, I need a single platform because I thought, heaven help me if I have body part AI algorithms coming to me. I would have to bolt on so many different AI tools into every little CT machine and imaging and PACS system that it would be really difficult to do. It'd be difficult to staff, to support, to manage all the contracts. So I said, Viz, I need one platform. I, as an IT guy, want a partner that I can build upon with other algorithms and get feedback with other physicians. And they said, we want to do that too. So that was important to me. The subspecialist may not care about that. The radiologist may say, well, I want my particular radiology application. But as a CIO in a health system, all of us have to be cost conscious, and we have to make the best decision for the enterprise. And I'm still a platform guy. I would say, as I kind of go forward through this presentation, I want to encourage all of you now, and I'm going to pause for a second, take a sip of water. I would go out to the App Store right now, and you can download an app called the Viz Training AI Stroke app. And you can do that. I did that earlier, and I've used this many times as I've done cocktail parties with my friends and family to try to explain it. So let me just take 10 seconds. I'm going to have a little water, give you guys time to go download this app. Okay. All of us can multitask, and so I know my IT people will want to multitask as they're listening to me, seeing the slides, and then start to play in the app. So Viz was founded by Chris Mancy, a neurosurgeon out of England, and the Israeli firm in Israel. And Israel has a lot of artificial intelligence right now that's being commercialized in different industries. And I thought about that, and my conclusion is that Israel has a lot of enemies around it, and it's a very small country. And so what they've done with their military and their military investment is said, hey, we need to be smarter. And so a lot of the technology that we're seeing in healthcare, I know several other applications outside of imaging are coming from this Israeli center of excellence related to AI. But Viz has some very large customers. HCA is one, UPMC, you can see the others here at Cleveland Clinic. And then it's grown over time. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to do. We were among the first hospital in HCA. HCA has 180 plus hospitals now. Viz is across 100 hospitals. That happened within a period of about 18 months. So the technology and the deployment of this is very quick. And I can talk more about that if there's a question. So from a CIO, one question I always get is, did the vendor deliver? And I can tell you that this Viz has delivered. The technology, the leadership there, the relationship building that they've had with me, and the fact they've got a great cloud partner with Amazon has made this thing scale very easy. And it's been exciting to watch. The Viz platform, I want to just, as a moment, I say this a lot, but I think this is important. As soon as the head enters the CT scan, the images are being sent to the Viz cloud. And so the round trip between when the first image hits the CT to when it comes to the physician's phone is around 6 minutes. About 2.5 minutes of that is processing in the cloud. The rest of it is moving the image from the CT across the networks and back, and then ultimately on the physician's phone. That's pretty amazing. That's a consistent number. So that takes us from previously, as I described, a ED doc calling a radiologist saying, can you prioritize this? I think it's a stroke, to the whole care team seeing the stroke, the picture, texting, messaging, which we'll talk about, within 6 minutes. As many of you know, particularly imaging informaticists, hopefully are listening, a CT of a head is not a single picture, it's 1,000 pictures, maybe 1,500 pictures. And what the hard part is in the way that AI improves productivity, is finding the slide, the scan that shows the large vessel occlusion or the ischemic explosion of the vessels. That's where the productivity increase happened on the radiology side. And then the second productivity increase happened in the communication of that, which we'll talk about. So Viz is now connected to our CT scans. It's actually a more complex DICOM router relationship that we have. We also use Nuance PowerShare for our outreach network, which I'm happy to talk about on this presentation, or you can reach me offline. I'm on LinkedIn, Andy Draper, and I can tell you about it. It was pretty simple. And I don't mean that from a CIO level. I mean, I was intimately involved with this because I was very curious about this, and our imaging team moved very quickly with it. So it comes from the CT, from the scanner, through the different PACS and DICOM routers that we have, goes to the Viz cloud, and then it comes back on the phone and to our care team in the hospitals. They also have a desktop solution. So a very powerful way to look at it. Viz has its own algorithms. They also have an API that they can plug into, and then they've been a great partner with us, HCA in total, and my division of hospitals, in trying to look at what other images can be processed using machine learning and algorithms in the cloud. This next slide is security. Of course, Viz is secure. All applications need to go through that security process. You can see here on this slide a lot of ISO certifications. Every health system in the era that we're in now, healthcare security is a big deal, particularly in the Ukrainian war that's happening now that Russia imposed upon an innocent country. But security was addressed. It went through rigorous security. I teach information security as well. I know that there are information security professionals that are very passionate. They're going to take Viz through all the paces of their organization and have at it. I think the punchline is they've spent a lot of investment in it, and we did not have a problem in deploying it in our own hospitals and our external partner hospitals that aren't on our network. So for those of you who understand what I just said, it passed all the tests that we had. I want to go back to the mobile app, and I think I'm going to go quickly through this slide, and then I'll show you kind of how it works in real time. And I really hope all of you have been out onto the App Store and looked at the Viz AI stroke training app. What you want to do is get a picture of a stroke across this care team. So it's the ED physician, it's the neuroradiologist, it's the radiologist who may do the final reading, it's the interventionalist who's going to do the procedure, the brain coiling, it's the stroke nurse, it is the OR prep staffer who's prepping the OR for the case, it is transportation. All these different things that make healthcare very unique and complex and very manual. Part of that productivity gain is in the immediate communication of this. So this slide here allows that their application makes this complex communication of the different data and the messaging done in a simple way, desktop or mobile phone, so that physicians, the transfer center, the nurses, the stroke coordinators, the EMS, CT techs, everyone that's involved can get that immediately. And that's important because it is a race against time. Our neurosurgeon, Don Fry, here said, there's 1 million brain cells that die every second. And so every second counts. And that's why using a tool that is an integrated platform that can message and share that picture across multiple teams really is a picture's worth 1,000 words times the number of people who need to see it, and that's the value. Also, as we all know, strokes don't just happen in hospitals, they happen at home or other places, which means you're moving that patient via EMS to the hospital. And so the EMS can be involved. The hospital's involved. You can start looking at the pictures. The EMS is able to use that information to document that what the case was actually done, because the EMS needs to be reimbursed appropriately. You can do it for head here. You can see that this is getting in the neurology space. And I want to just share real deeply here. If you look in the middle of this slide, and I'm putting my glasses on, these are images. So that is a picture of a head, a brain CT. And so you can see that that is an isolated picture. So that could be slide, number 555 out of a series that has 1,100. And this is being processed as the head enters the CT. So it's not waiting until the study's concluded. It's happening real time. And you can see on the bottom, there's a little scroll here that you can see. And if you were able to do that, and if you're playing at home with the application, you can see how you can change the contrast and look at the brain in a very detailed way. And then the experts can see where the occlusion is or where the brain bleed is. You can also see that behind there is a messaging app. And so you can immediately see the imaging, the messaging. You can start having your stroke coordinators start coordinating the care of the patient, rushing them into the OR for care. And then you can also see you can do some referral work with it. You can do phone calls. You can receive the message. You can text if everyone's texting. If it's a day where people are on the phone, they want to talk, you hit the button and it immediately calls the person at the other end of the line. It's built into the system, of course, and you can talk to the stroke coordinator and get their real-time input. So this is really an integrated app that I think in my original slide starts to begin to improve the productivity for this specific DRG and service line of stroke and then now vascular. And this is another example. It's, of course, HIPAA compliant because it's secure. It's in their cloud. It's behind the network. And the app is downloadable and secure. And then you're able to see here, you can find the patient. You can click the team. You can select all. You can see the number of messages. It's really a very nicely done mobile application by itself, frankly. So I'm wrapping up here. One of the goals is to make decisions faster. We believe that this has done that for us, and I'll show you the results here. By doing that, we've been able to improve our quality message, which has also helped ED docs out in the country refer to us because we're a trusted stroke center. Real quick, we're in Denver, Colorado. The area that we service, one of the hospital CEOs said, is larger than the state of France, the country of France. Everyone in healthcare thinks their healthcare system's big. Our problem is that we have to solve for a lot of rural areas and across many different states. And some of those we own and most of those we don't. And so we needed an application that we could deploy in our hospitals and our freestanding EDs, but also go out to our partner and stroke network participants and deploy it. And we were able to do that. So we have a lot of hospitals. We also have a major hospital in Wichita, Kansas, 800-bed hospital, Wesley Medical Center. They also have this. So we're able to cover basically a good chunk of what my coastal friends call flyover country, except when they go skiing every year. So in conclusion, and this is my last slide, our results at Swedish, and this has been validated by our stroke team and our interventional surgeons, is we've increased the access to care in that we've allowed more procedures to be done. One of our first partners was Vail Health in Vail, Colorado, and they have a lot of patients that they see during different ski seasons in the summer season, and they needed to be able to have better diagnosis to be able to say, hey, we can keep this patient. It's not a stroke. They just had too much to drink or something, or they're not used to the altitude. So we don't have to send them to Denver and ruin their vacation. We can keep them. And I think that's what's important. And for those of you who are large health systems looking at your rural, one of our goals, and it's a requirement by the federal government to be sure, but we want to leave the care that can be done locally to the local hospitals. And with the nursing shortages now, that's really important. So with VIS, the rural ED physicians, the rural radiologists are able to say, okay, with confidence within 6 minutes of a round trip picture from head CT to their phone, hey, this patient can stay. Or they could say this patient needs to be shipped down the mountain. Better patient outcomes because we're intervening earlier, faster, more accurately. And then without a doubt, compared to the old time of all these different serial sequencing of communication events and phone calls primarily, this is now on an integrated app with a mobile platform, with mobile messaging, instant phone calls. And so I believe, in conclusion, as a CIO, I can't speak all the details of the clinical, although our doctors and nurses love it. Our stroke coordinators find strokes that were missed in some cases. VIS, the technology picked it up. They're able to capture that patient in the hospital while they're still there. As an IT guy, this was easy to deploy. It was secure. And the training was very simple. I was able to demo all the chiefs that I needed to sell this to by downloading the app. They just loved it. The board of directors loved it. They loved looking at the application and showing their friends, hey, this is what the board just approved to be deployed at our hospital. Look how cool this is. So that technology, I think VIS has done an excellent job in saying, yes, we can improve the productivity of stroke, and now they're looking at AAA and vascular care, and I know that we're a pilot for that, and I know that that'll be successful as well.